no paper published, no guidance of what is the right cost. How much should a company be spending? What kind of ecosystem costs exist in the market? How do we really make it happen? So we will go into throwing some light basis our experiences, and we also have multiple people beyond us who will help throw some light on different aspects of the costs involved in making circular economy happen. So I'll first like to invite Vilma to share her views. So Vilma, we have been discussing about the circular economy and especially the costs aspect a lot. So would you like to share your thoughts, first on circular economy and then the costs involved from your point of view?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pranchu. And I think, we have had so many internal discussions one-on-one with each other and with the larger ecosystem. Really there is a lot of discomfort in the way things are moving in terms of people understanding what is the system that has to be implemented on the ground and what is the fair system that we all need to work towards. For me, I always keep thinking about, and I can share this, when you look at the world economy in 2020, which was about 85 trillion dollars, and the fact that 50% of this amount actually came from nature. Yeah, so all our food, our clothing, our housing, all the raw materials needed for manufacturing, all of that came to us as need in the form of nature's goodness. And so therefore, when we talk about circular economy, when we talk about the regenerative economy, we are actually looking now to find a system to put back things. So really now EPR is this tool that is enabling us to give back to nature and give back, like all the other species, things that we have taken previously in a linear system, change it around and bring it back to give back to the planet and give back to nature. Now, when you're looking at EPR as a tool for enabling that to happen, obviously there is large amounts of investment that has to go in so that this will happen. And there are two main things that we now need to look at. One would be the infrastructure, because today we are still talking just about recycling. And I'm sure we are going to have discussions again coming into recycling. But this may be also a good forum to look beyond recycling, because when you are talking about resource recovery, we're talking about actually reducing our dependence on virgin materials, because that's what we want to kind of reduce extraction from the planet. So therefore, if that is what our ultimate goal is, then imagine the kind of investment that industry has to put in, industry and consumers combined have to put in, so that we will have a robust system for resource recovery. So even when we are talking of renewable energy, for solar, we need to make sure that first of all there is a good repair refurbishing system in place, and finally at end of life make sure all of that material comes back into proper closed loop recycling. So all our, not just solar panels, but all our computer hardware, our lithium ion batteries, all of that will have to go through the system. And then also when we are looking at packaging and plastic packaging, paper packaging, how are we going to make sure there is closed loop recycling so that materials are recovered and our dependence on virgin materials is reduced. So that would be the first big investment that we would expect to be budgeted for, and to be able for us to see the infrastructure come on the ground for this form of resource recovery, recycling being a very small part of the solution. And of course, the second part will be then to bring back the materials, or rather the can have a take back and a reverse logistics system. And I think we can discuss that in the session, but when you're looking at reverse logistics, there will be different kinds of costs, transportation for sure, but also because we are now dealing with post-consumer different kinds of material, we will again need infrastructure for aggregation of these materials, for the dry waste collection centers that we have, and not just putting up the infrastructure for it, but also to make sure that there is adequate operational budgets there so that these centers are actually run like the way they are supposed to be run. So yes, there's going to be cost from the industry, and there's going to be costs from the consumers who will now have to pay the real price of conveniences. Previously we've all looked at the recycling symbol and believe that recycling takes place automatically. Now we know that there is a big cost for it, and this cost will have to come to us through various different means where our products will be more expensive. But that's where again we will be, changing the system so that we will address this, so that we will not go back to a linear kind of system. So I would say that these are the two main costs which will have to be borne by industry. Today we have a situation where brands are expected by regulation, and they are now under compliance to make sure that there is a proper system in place. But we see really that there is still that companies still don't have their real budgets put in place. So you have a sustainability team very often in these companies, but and I hope that some of the audience here will also be part of industry and of sustainability teams. But we find that the sustainability teams themselves have limitations in terms of actually getting their appropriate budgets approved. We find that sustainability teams perhaps don't have that kind of voice that they should have in senior management. They may be part of senior management, but they're still not able to actually move with the right kind of system, making sure that compliance is not just a compliance of volumes. So we've seen that there is a pressure from CPCB, there's a pressure from the regulatory bodies, and therefore that reaction to that pressure, but not to build a system like the way EPR was meant to be built. So I'll stop there and with these opening remarks, but maybe Prancho, after you've given a little bit of context as well, we could have a small discussion on the more details of where we are seeing gaps in terms of actual pricing.
Sure. Sure. Thank you,
One
Vilma.
more last thing, Prancho, one more last thing, and that is now we're talking about EPR for e-waste. We're talking about EPR for plastic waste, which is there as part of the regulations today. But definitely, we cannot have paper replace plastic. Single-use plastic is now going into paper, into aluminium. So therefore, I hope quickly we will have these kind of materials also come under EPR, as is textiles, which is increasingly becoming an issue, and we need that. Also glass. So all materials really need to have the ambit or come under the ambit of producer responsibility, consumer responsibility, and materials going back so that we have less dependence on virgin materials. Thanks, Prancho.
Yeah, thank you, Vilma. So I think we are already seeing a trend in the country where EPR is being applied to multiple sectors and multiple product categories. It started with electronics waste, e-waste, electrical and electronic waste, but then moved on to be applied for plastics. Now it is on for tires. It is also very recently we also had the battery waste rules. So end of life vehicles is being planned. So there are multiple categories that are being covered under EPR. But what remains a big question, and this is something that I constantly hear from my industry colleagues, from my other value chain stakeholders, that what are the right costs of EPR? Whenever a producer is today going out and trying to figure out at what cost should they be working, there is no one common number. The range which comes is kind of a crazy range, almost from a 10 rupee per kilogram to 90 rupees per kilogram for the same product. So, and hence the dilemma that can there be such a wide range in the costs of managing the same product? So let's just try understanding, at least from my point of view, what are the different costs that are entailed in making EPR happen. And before that, let's spend a minute to understand what is the present system. In the present system, we are producing products. We are maybe designing products better from an environmental viewpoint. We are then putting these products on the market. We provide some customer support, and that's where the work used to end. In the new regime, if we are to really go circular, we are to provide solutions for ideally for reuse of the product, maybe for refurbishment, and this may not be the same company, it may be someone else, and then essentially getting it recycled. And once the product is recycled, can the elements in the product be reutilized to remake a similar type of product? So that's the chain, that's the loop that we are trying to close. Now, if I look at the new costs, and I will not focus on reuse and refurbishment, I will focus only on recycling right now, considering we are talking of EPR here. If we are to essentially focus on recycle, then there are three big cost buckets that I see. The very first is, how do you create collection channels? And setting up collection channels could be as wide as a distribution channel. So for example, when we put a product on the market, we work with retail, we work with distributors. We have multiple types of channels, right from a home delivery solution to a consumer coming at a retail point. So if we look at a very similar variety of channels to be created, the cost of these channels will vary significantly. So the cost of working with a retail outlet to collect a product versus a channel in which one is delivering a service at a home, which means I have an old refrigerator, an old mobile phone, please come and pick it up, and someone is offering that solution, the cost would be widely different. In addition, majority of our waste historically has been going to the informal sector. So if you are to work with the informal sector and you are to formalize them, improve the working conditions, think of elimination of child labor across the whole informal sector, paying fair wages and so forth, we are talking of a variety of costs. What we have noticed that the biggest cost in the system is in terms of setting up these collection channels. The second aspect, which is very specific to a country like India or similar emerging markets, is the amount of money that you have to pay to get the product or the waste in your hands. So whenever waste changes hands, people expect money. So if we are going and picking up waste from an individual household, or if we are even procuring it from a office complex, there is an expectation from the consumer or the bulk consumer to be paid for that waste. And actually, this is a very, very large cost. Think of a mobile phone, for example. No one, but much of our research shows that no one is willing to give even a completely broken mobile phone for no cost. They will still expect a 50 rupee to be paid for a completely broken mobile phone. If it is not broken, the expectation is to take it all the way up to a few hundred rupees. Now, so setup of collection system and then procurement of the waste via that collection system essentially form a very, very big chunk of the total cost of collecting. Once you have collected this waste, the next aspect is how do you manage it? So one will need to set up collection centers. These collection centers are to be managed properly. They have to be housed properly. There are certain conditions that they have to fulfill. So setting up these collection centers, managing these collection centers is the next rung of cost. Then the logistics. Logistics, both collecting the waste from individual household or a retail point till the warehouse or the collection center, and then from this collection center all the way till the recycler. Now, recyclers in India are also not necessarily located very near, or they are not spread out across the country, especially the ones that I would call as responsible recyclers. So one may need to transport material for a few hundred kilometers before it is truly recycled. And then we have the cost of managing this whole show. So someone, who's going, who's doing training, who's building capacities, who's procuring the waste, in case there is a technology platform deployed to make it all happen, those costs. So this is what essentially, are the pillars of defining costs. Setup of the collection channel, the amount of money which goes to procure the waste, the amount of money that is to be either paid to a recycler, or recycler may pay some money back because of positive recycling of certain product categories, and then the operation costs. So at a very base level, this is what I would call as the cost of having a system which will allow products to be collected back. Now, Wilma, as I shared, we have been hearing a very wide range of costs being, or budgets being created by brands uh, when they meet their EPR targets. So, would you like to share some numbers that you have heard, and I'm happy to also share the same. So, and then this would, why we want to share this is it would help all of us to just understand that what are the real right costs.
Yes.
So, Wilma.
Yes. So I can talk about plastic a little bit, because we are one of the WMAs that work with different brands, and the fact is that we are dealing now with both recyclable and non-recyclable plastic waste. The non-recyclable being the bulk, because that is the problem plastic in terms of your multi-layered plastic. And I should again reiterate that this is all post consumer plastic, which is coming, as you mentioned, from so many different sources, some of it soiled, some of it with very poor infrastructure when you're dealing with the informal sector, etc. So we are looking at non-recyclable waste, where our costs to the brand is at around 5 rupees per kg currently. And imagine we are doing all of that, including awareness, collection, managing the MRF, all of that for 5 rupees a kg. And in our estimate, that is actually just 50% of what the cost should be, because actually our real budget should be in the range of 10 to 12 rupees, because we're also looking at how to formalize the informal sector. How do we make sure that the partners whom we are collecting all of this waste has a roof above their heads, work with PPEs, have no child labor in the system. And then we also have to show tracking, traceability, documentation right up to the recycler. We are accountable to CPC as well. All of that for 5 rupees a kg. And imagine, Pranchu, we still have brands who don't want to work with us. We are currently working with a very few number of brands, because the expectations of brands is less than 1 rupee is what they're really looking at. Of course, we've not made any compromises on what we believe we should be delivering on. So we stick with 5, which is actually 50% of the cost. And that is for the non-recyclable waste. For the recyclable, you do have some amount of recycling of plastic taking place, PET, PP, all of that. So there our EPR to the brand is about 2.5 rupees per kg. And again, we are saying that is barely actually 30% of what we should be receiving, because the cost for all those that you mentioned, including the transporter, including the transport to the recycler, is far more. And one other point that we have to make sure before is the kind of lead of time that is taken before one of our revenue streams is a revenue from the recycler. Say, for instance, when we deliver to the PET recyclers, and PET is supposed to be one of the best kinds of plastic, but the kind of delays that we face to receive monies after we have delivered the product to the recycler is phenomenal. And that takes a hit on our cash flows. And who is going to take responsibility for that when our cash flows are being, dented just because there is so much of a delay from the recycler? And the expectations from brands is phenomenal. They want professional services, they want everything else to be in perfect condition, including their documentation, but they're not willing to pay the price of what they should be paying. And I think we really need, as organizations, as consumers, we're putting out there our challenges, but we would want action to take place so that there is a better delivery of services from all sides, and definitely so that EPR on the ground, comes into this kind of system that we're all looking for it to come into. Yeah, so that's about plastic, approach.
Thank you, Vilma. So I think one of the big challenges that I also see is, this very large differences on the costs of EPR is also creating an unlevel playing field in the market. There are great brands who are wanting to do the right work, who are actually calculating the real costs on their own. They are putting in some research on what should be the right money that they should be spending, doing a should cost analysis, and then working in the right direction. But then when they see their peers, they see a very large difference. Someone who is spending, 1/10 of the same, of what this brand is spending. And that is creating a whole fluctuation in the market that should I be doing, even be complying, or should I just do paperwork like, someone else is doing, because they are able to operate and no one is getting punished, even when they operate at such low costs. So what I'm also seeing is a big trend where organizations who are not necessarily doing the right thing, they are benefiting, and the organizations who are doing the right thing, putting in the best effort, putting in the right money, are really neither getting incentivized nor so they feel that they are being in some way being penalized by the system for doing the right thing. So to give you some idea of what I hear from IT categories today, if we talk of refrigerators, for example, the cost of both, right from collection, procurement, moving it to recycler, getting it recycled, the cost is ranging anywhere from 6 rupees to 15, 16 rupees a kilogram. For a mobile phone, we are seeing a range of anywhere between, again, 9 rupees for a kilogram, which means 5 or 6 mobile phones in a kilogram. From 9 rupees to anywhere between, 80 rupees a kilogram. For a desktop, we are seeing a range of, again, anywhere between 15 rupees to 50 rupees per kilogram. For servers, again, anywhere between 7, 8 rupees to 50, 60 rupees a kilogram. So the range is so wide. And in the absence of good published data sets, in the absence of methodologies by which brands can calculate these costs, or some notional numbers, some reference data sets, we are seeing that we are all, falling into a race to the bottom, where everyone is looking at someone else and saying, oh, well, they are operating at a very significantly low cost. Why should I be paying more? And organizations who are even trying to do the right thing are now being pushed in some way to lower their guards, to do a much lower level of work. So while we had anticipated that the level playing field would be created after a few years of EPR implementation, what we are finding is this is completely absent and is creating a very wrong incentive. So, but this is the topic of debate for today. We have some fantastic speakers lined up. Vilma, do you want to add anything before we move on? Vilma, you are on mute.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine, and we'd like to hear from the other speakers, and yeah, I think this has been a great opportunity to also kind of talk to you, and I'm really appreciating the fact that we're having this conversation. So thanks. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Vilma. And I think for the benefit of everyone who is present today, I think we are looking at coming up with either certain studies, some benchmarks, and this can only be done when many players join hands together, so that industry has some reference on what is the right cost of compliance, what is it that they should do. Even the pollution control boards today, they do not know, at what price should a, while companies are declaring their EPR budgets in the plans when they submit for EPR authorization. But is that budget adequate? Can that budget really yield the right results? Those questions remain unanswered because of lack of data sets. So one of the things that we are also proposing, and we would like to hear from the group which is present here, that would you be interested in participating in such a study where costs of different parts of the value chain, whether it is setup of new infrastructure for collection, or it is working with existing infra like retail points, like existing distributors, formalizing the informal sector. What are the costs of creating that physical infrastructure? What is the cost of procurement? And this would vary state by state, city by city, because there is nothing defined per se. Consumer can ask 50 rupees and he may ask 500 rupees. I mean, uh, so there is no real logic behind it. Plus the cost of logistics, which would be common for most of the players. Recycling returns. Again, a phone, even if I give or Wilma gives or if someone else, they will fetch the same money. So certain things are common, which would be the same for any system, whereas certain things would vary depending on the collection channels or the money that you are paying uh, to either a person or to a bulk consumer to get the waste. So we are looking forward to come up with some level of a baseline study, which will allow this very, very fundamental thing for EPR to be established and succeed in this country. So we are looking forward to that study. We are planning to do that study, and we would be happy to hear from people. If you are interested, please drop a note in the chat. And also, what kind of role would you like to play, if at all, in this work? So with this, I would like to hand over to Shri Priya to carry forward the next panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Pranshu. Thank you so much, Wilma. I think both of your discussions gave us a lot of context on what the true cost of EPR, what needs to be considered for the true cost of EPR. Now, I would like to invite our panelists. Our first panelist is Shri Rajiv Kumar Sharma, Environment Engineer, Delhi Pollution Control Committee. Our panelist two is Ms. Nalini Shekhar, co-founder Hasiru Dalla, Green Force. Hasiru Dalla is a social impact organization that works with waste pickers and other waste workers to ensure a life with dignity. Our panelist three is Ms. Tamara Welbor. She is the business strategies lead at Circle Economy. She is also involved in a project together with GESI on take back systems and business models for electronics. So, yeah, hi. Hello. Can you all hear me well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. So just one little mic test. Ms. Tamara and Mr. Rajiv, just say hello, and I think we are good to go.
Hello, hello, Anjia. Good afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. So my first question goes to Mr. Rajiv. Sir, in the experience of Delhi Pollution Control Board, what has been some challenges that you commonly encounter from the producer's side, challenges due to which they are non-compliant to EPR regulations, or even some other challenges that may have come across your way?
Hello. In myself, Rajiv Sharma. In regard to EPR, generally we are only looking collection points of the EPR. They are mentioning in their EPR. और बेसिकली हमने देखा है कि जितने भी वो अपने कलेक्शन सेंटर्स वगैरह देते हैं हमारे को, वो वहाँ पे अवेलेबल नहीं होते हैं, और वो सारा पेपर जो भी है पेपर्स पे ही सारा उनका होता है कि हमने इतना ई वेस्ट रिसाइकल कर दिया, इतना हमारा ई वेस्ट आया, और ऑन ग्राउंड पे हम जाते हैं वहाँ पे कलेक्शन पॉइंट्स पे कोई रिकॉर्ड अवेलेबल नहीं होता। और जितने मल्टीपल कलेक्शन प्रोड्यूसर्स जो एक ही होता है कलेक्शन सेंटर, वो मल्टीपल प्रोड्यूसर्स के लिए होता है, तो वहाँ पे उनकी जो फैसिलिटी होती है, जो लॉजिस्टिक होते हैं, उनके पास उनका कोई रिकॉर्ड अवेलेबल नहीं होता। तो और प्रोड्यूसर्स भी दिल्ली में, हमारे यहाँ इतने प्रोड्यूसर्स नहीं है, दिल्ली में रिसाइकलर्स भी नहीं है, तो जनरली हमारे को इतना चैलेंज ईपीआर के लिए नहीं है, और स्टेट्स में काफ़ी है, तो दिल्ली में इतना नहीं है इसका हमारे को ईपीआर के लिए। दिल्ली से बाहर जो है रिसाइकलर्स एंड प्रोड्यूसर डिस्मेंटलर्स हैं, तो दिल्ली के लिए इतना बड़ा ये चैलेंज नहीं है अभी।
Okay, very well. Thank you so much, sir. So I would like to pose my next question to Ms. Nalini. Uh, uh, Ma'am, Hasirudalla has worked very closely with waste workers since over a decade. And could you share with us some ideas on how corporates and producer brands can invest in EPR compliance in a way which is inclusive of these waste workers? Also, whatever producers are paying today, does it even cover the costs? Ma'am, you're on mute.
Sorry. So I just wanted to tell you, we don't have any EPR this year or last year or before that, because the cost that Vilma was talking about, 1 rupee, we will not even accept because we can't do it. I think couple of years back, a Singapore group had done an analysis of the costing, which has come up to 6 rupees 50 paise for us, and that is because the government had given a subsidized, centers. So if you really have to do it, it is for us, it is about 10 to 12 rupees per kilo for MLP, for example. So it's not possible for us to really work in the EPR system right now. Otherwise, we have to subsidize the cost of labor, which we don't want to do. When if you really want to include informal sector, and India has a very high informal group that is engaged in waste collection and recycling or downcycling, depending on who you're talking to and how much quantity. So even Rajya Sabha, report has said in e-waste, 95% of the e-waste dismantling is happening in informal sector. But the laws do not recognize and include them. At least in the plastic EPR system, there was some level of inclusion in the previous version, but the present version doesn't even talk about them. Being silent doesn't mean you have an answer. This is a sector that is vibrant, has the capacity to collect. What we really want to look at is actually, fair price, or our people, we had a huge discussion about what is living wage and so on and so forth. So they really look at living wage. Fair wages, forget it. Living wage they're asking for. Even if there is fair wage and all the social security that is available by the government, if we access, maybe we come close to the living wage. So today's EPR system is not at all, is conducive for workers to work in a decent way. Especially for multi-layer plastic. Other plastics are also, the amount of money that is given very marginal, and it is really not possible to work. With the kind of EPR laws and the way the auction is happening, we see a lot of companies putting out how much of recycling they have done, and done it very successfully. But on the street, we have not seen any change. So that would be my first thought. So there is no space today for informal sector.
Okay, and could you, are there any ways in which it can be considered? If you could, if you could suggest some solutions?
Yeah, so in Bangalore and throughout Karnataka, the city has set up dry waste collection center. Now we call them MRF. But dry waste collection center was first set up in Bangalore way before Swachh Bharat and all that came. So across Karnataka, we have the centers already. So working with the local government and waste pickers running these centers, EPR could definitely invest in these centers and providing the soft skill and working on the data, traceability, all that we have set up now. So they should be able to work with us and with the local, municipality or corporation together. Then definitely we can do. Today we collect anywhere between 60 to 65 tons of MLP every day. Every day. So you can imagine these are 10 grams or 15 grams. You can imagine how much we are collecting. We collect in about 30% of the city, and there are no way to go. So after collecting and sorting, many times it's just going to landfill after cleaned MLP. And of course, we are also doing some level of making boards and all. It's a very, very small portion. So investment in technology, first of all, we have to look at what is the material it is used, whether it can be recyclable. If it cannot be recycled, it cannot be get into the circular economy, those products should not be there in the market.
Noted, noted. Thank you so much. So then, if one takeaway would be, then if at all we have joint investments to run these MRFs successfully, like complete investment in the value chain, it can go a long way.
Yes.
Now, thank you. So next question is to Ms. Tamara. So Tamara, in the Netherlands, now that you I hope you were able to capture the Indian context of EPR a little bit. So just wanted to know, in Netherlands, are the brands able to pay the real cost of EPR? Like, how is it even determined there? And are there any scientific tools that are used there? I mean, if we can begin from here.
Yes, definitely. And so I would first like to say that already it's been so insightful speaking with you in preparation for this webinar, that for me what comes out more and more is the need for localized solutions, right? I think the circular economy is such a great concept that probably finds its appeal worldwide, but then to make it work is to understand the local context. So I think in that sense, what you face in India might be slightly different in the Netherlands, because as most of you might know, we're a relatively small country. So in that sense, I think setting up a take back might be easier here than in such a massive country as that you are. And here that we have quite a formalized sector for EPR. So basically, as part of we have these organizations that collect all kinds of electronic waste, and basically as a consumer, I can hand it in any store that also sells electrical equipment. They're also obligated to take in. So when it comes also to the setup of channels, I think that we have the channels quite established here. But then at the same time, what is a challenge is the awareness of consumers. So what I still notice that, so I'm knowledgeable about this because of my work, but if I check in with friends or family, then many of them, even though it is quite well organized, they're not even aware of the necessity or the possibility of handing in any electronics that they might not want anymore. But basically, so I think what we have as a good practice here, that so it's in place. So basically, it's obligatory, and we have quite a distributed channel. It's quite easy to hand back in your equipment if you want, but at the same time, awareness is still lacking. So also studies here say that, bringing up also the mobile phones, it's estimated that a lot of old phones end up still in drawers because people either don't realize the value if they would hand it back in, or they are still not aware of where to hand in their phone or any other piece of equipment. Or even that I also learned that people still throw it in their household waste. So then, of course, for sure, the value is not captured. But so how can we get to a solution? So I was thinking of sharing a very good example, or at least one that I personally find really powerful. That's an organization called Closing the Loop. And so basically what they say is they compensate. So they allow organizations who buy new electronics that they can take back a piece of electronics that now finds its way on landfill in Africa, that they will take that off of landfill, so that they allow for workers over there to be paid if they extract the piece of electronics from the landfill, and then it's actually shipped back to Europe, because we do have proper recycling facilities, whereas in Africa apparently there aren't proper recycling facilities yet. So I think, yeah, to wrap it up here, I think so. One thought I had was, how can we move from cost to value? Because I think as soon as you shift the perspective from not what is the cost of compliance to what exactly is the value opportunity embedded here, and an organization such as Closing the Loop really managed to switch this around. So they provide a solution here for companies in the Netherlands who still want to buy new equipment, for example, for their employees. But then they can do good by then allowing people who are currently in the informal sector in Africa to be paid if they get electronic devices from landfill. And the environmental benefits are that then these pieces of equipment are actually transferred back to Europe, where they can then properly be recycled, and the valuable resources that are extracted in the electronics actually can find their way back into new uses.
Thanks for sharing that. Just to add, I had a second question to what you just shared. You spoke about the consumer behavior, and that's where I just want to ask you, like, what is needed to get the consumer behavior in line with the EPR targets? So, like, to get them actually hand in their phones. So, do you have a successful case study out there?
So what I can share as part of the project that you also briefly mentioned in my introduction. So as Circle Economy, we currently partner with Jesse. So they use the ICT sector to achieve sustainability goals. And as part of the Circular Electronics Partnership, so that's basically a multi-stakeholder initiative who have set up a roadmap to make electronics circular. There are multiple activities as part of that roadmap. And one of which is how to tie in the take-back mechanism to the business model. And so indeed, one of the deep dives that we do as part of this project is how do we incentivize customer behavior? And so the companies who are involved in this initiative are, for example, also ones that are part of your webinar series, such as Dell, but also Currys. And some of the best practices that they've shared is, well, you have to, for one, also put a value to it, right? So if you want to trigger customers to actually hand something in, can you give a voucher to them? So thereby actually putting a value on something instead of calling it waste. Like, hey, if you hand it back in, we pay you for it. And then also a proper price. So that is all. Then it's also actually a real incentive, because they can then get with that voucher the newest device back. But also a lot was spoken about awareness campaigns, so that we shouldn't underestimate that many consumers want to do good, but then they do have to know that actually because it requires, of course, extra behavior. It's an effort if you have a piece of equipment at home. And I recently had it. I had a broken coffee machine. I wanted to hand it back in, but it was an effort. I have to find the time and the place on where to do it. But then if there's an awareness campaign that tells me, well, either I will get actual money back in hand, sometimes that works, or a voucher so that the next device I can purchase with a discount, or in some cases, if you play to people's also willingness to do good through proper awareness campaigns, that actually also led to increased return of equipment.
Thank you so much, Tamara, for sharing that example as well. So now I would move on to the next question, and that is to Mr. Rajiv. So you mentioned about the major gap between the collection centers that are actually being declared versus what is the reality of the collection center, and there is a big gap there. So are you happy with the work being done for e-waste management in Delhi? What more can we really do? What do you think we should do more to improve these systems?
देखिए, दिल्ली में क्या है कि दिल्ली में कलेक्शन सेंटर होने चाहिए प्रोड्यूसर्स के, लेकिन प्रोड्यूसर्स जो हैं वो कलेक्शन सेंटर जो भी है अपना बजट बनाते हैं, एस्टीमेट बनाते हैं कि हम कलेक्शन सेंटर करेंगे, रिसाइकलर से करेंगे, वो प्रैक्टिकली तो कुछ होता नहीं है। हम सीपीसीबी को यही लिखते हैं कि इनका ईपीआर कैंसिल कर दिया जाए, इस पे एक्शन लिया जाए, और जो भी ये बनाते हैं अपना कलेक्शन पॉइंट्स वो सारे रेजिडेंशियल एरिया में होते हैं। यहाँ जनरली लॉजिस्टिक होते हैं, अग्रवाल मूवर एंड पैकर एंड समथिंग, वो इस टाइप के होते हैं। वहाँ पे कभी ई वेस्ट ना कलेक्ट होता है, ऑन पेपर्स ही मैंने बताया, ऑन पेपर्स ही ये करते हैं, और सीपीसी भी इस पे एक्शन, इसको चेंजेस करने चाहिए कि इसके अंदर पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल बोर्ड जो स्टेट पॉल्यूशन है उनकी अप्रूवल के बाद ही इनको ईपीआर वगैरह इनको ग्रांट करना चाहिए कि प्रॉपरली इनके कलेक्शन पॉइंट्स हैं कि नहीं है, और जो ये बजट अपना ये कर रहे हैं तो ये बजट्स वगैरह इस पे कहाँ खर्च करेंगे, कैसे करेंगे, कहाँ अवेयरनेस में खर्च करेंगे, कौन से रिसाइकलर से इन्होंने करा है, रिसाइकलर की कैपेसिटी भी है कि नहीं। अब आप एक रिसाइकलर से अगर सारे प्रोड्यूसर एक ही रिसाइकलर से कर लेते हैं एग्रीमेंट, अब उसकी कैपेसिटी इतने टन नहीं है, तो वो सारा ऑन पेपर्स ही हो रहा है। तो इसलिए उसको आपको ये देखना पड़ेगा सीपीसीबी को, क्योंकि ये मास स्केल पे दे होता रहता है, ईपीआर ग्रांट कर देते हैं और पॉल्यूशन वालों को ये बोलते हैं भी आप इनके कलेक्शन सेंटर चेक करो। अब कलेक्शन सेंटर में हम जाते हैं, वहां मिलता नहीं है कुछ। तो इसलिए वहाँ पे प्रैक्टिकली तो इसका मुझे लगता नहीं है कि इनका कोई, दिल्ली में यही प्रॉब्लम है, दिल्ली का भी यही नहीं पता चल पाता कि कितना वेस्ट दिल्ली में अभी आ रहा है और दिल्ली में कहाँ पे जा रहा है, कैसे डिस्पोज कर रहे हैं। इसीलिए सारा जो भी इलीगली हैंडल हो रहा है, जैसे अभी मैडम बता रही थी कि अपना जितना भी ये सारा सेक्टर जो है इसमें अपना इलीगली और सब मैनर इसको हैंडल करते हैं। तो इसमें सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी में अगर लाना है तो दिल्ली में तो एक प्रपोजल आया है अभी के इको पार्क डेवलप कर रहे हैं, दिल्ली इंडिया का फर्स्ट इको पार्क, उसके लिए लैंड वगैरह भी एक जगह कर लिया, आइडेंटिफाई हो गया, लेकिन उसमें भी अभी टाइम लगेगा, जिसमें कि जो इनफॉर्मल सेक्टर है उसको लाना है और उसको करना है ताकि वो सारा उसमें डिसमेंटलिंग भी हो, रिफर्बिशिंग भी हो, एंड उसके बाद रिसाइकलिंग भी हो, और अंडर वन अम्ब्रेला सारा कुछ हम एक ही जगह करें, दिल्ली का क्लीन करें सारा, इलीगली ये बंद हो जाए। लेकिन अभी उसमें टाइम लगेगा, लेकिन तब तक जो आपने ये है कि ईपीआर के अंदर प्रोड्यूसर्स को यही होना चाहिए कि कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव करे, कि जब भी कोई प्रोडक्ट कोई लेता है तो उस प्रोडक्ट में कुछ कॉस्ट ऐड करके उसको बाई बैक वाली स्कीम में रखे कि वो बाई बैक उसको वो दे, और वो उसकी कॉस्ट जो है एट द टाइम ऑफ रिटर्निंग तो वो उसको कुछ पे करे, या उसको नए प्रोडक्ट में उसको एडजस्ट कर दे उसको, तभी ये वापस आ सकते हैं सारे प्रोडक्ट। अदरवाइज तो ये सारा मार्केट में जो बार बार रीयूज होते हैं, रिफर्बिशर्स के पास जाते हैं, वो इसको फिर करके दोबारा भेज देता है मार्केट में इसको। तो इसमें काफी गैप है जो कि हो नहीं रहा एक्चुअली कहीं भी रिसाइकलिंग वाला प्रॉपरली।
सर, तो उसी बात पे आई वुड लाइक टू जस्ट add to you one more question. Now, we know there is a big issue of the e-waste unscientific recycling in Selampur and Mustafabad, and it is huge. So, how do you think can such a challenge be tackled? And do you think there is a way to integrate them into the formal system?
हाँ, इसी के लिए कोई वे आउट निकाल रहे हैं कि चैनलाइज इनको करा जाए, जो हम भी कभी कभी हम भी करते हैं, इन्फोर्समेंट करते हैं, उनको बंद करते हैं, उनको सील भी करते हैं, उनका लाइट डिस्कनेक्ट भी करते हैं, ड्राइव करते हैं, लेकिन उससे कोई वो परमानेंट सोल्यूशन नहीं है। आप अगर उनको सील कर देते हो, हम उनको इन्वायरमेंटल कंपनसेशन भी लगाते हैं, तो लेकिन वो परमानेंट नहीं है। वो एक ब्लॉक में हमने करा तो उसके बाद वो कहीं नियर बाई और शिफ्ट हो जाते हैं, वो जल्दी यूपी बॉर्डर पे क्रॉस कर जाते हैं, फिर वो थोड़े टाइम चलती है, फिर वो वापस आ जाते हैं। तो वो इसका परमानेंट सोल्यूशन तो तभी होगा जब यहाँ पे कोई गवर्नमेंट इनिशिएटिव लेगी, या हमने तो ये था कि नहीं तो ऐसा कोई कलेक्शन पॉइंट्स बनाए जाए जिसमें कि आम पब्लिक जाके वहाँ पे उनको अपने जो प्रोडक्ट्स हैं उनको दे दे एंड ऑफ लाइफ के बाद, और वहाँ से उनको एक अच्छी कॉस्ट मिल जाए। या फिर अपना यही है कि जब तक इको पार्क नहीं बनता तो इसको ये चैलेंज रहेगा अभी तो दिल्ली में, तो क्योंकि इसमें एक जो काम कर रहे हैं लोग उसमें कोई अभी चलता है, सब पॉलिटिकल विल भी रहती है इसमें, जिसके लिए हमारे भी अपने लिमिटेशंस हैं कि हम क्या कर सकते हैं उसमें।
Yes, please, Nalini ma'am, you want to add something?
Yeah. I think what he was talking is absolutely right. You have to, bring them into a system that is scientifically appropriate, legally correct, and also ergonomically correct for the workers who work there. Just by telling we don't want to see them, we don't want them here is a problem. Even in 2016 law, it is clearly said that 5% of the industrial area has to be kept for recycling. Of course, that recycling for that particular industrial area, but that can open up 5% of an industrial area is huge. It can open up, for other, consumers also. So there is already a law. It's a question of implementation. If you give a place, better services, obviously the informal sector will be happy to do, because actually they are always under fear to operate, right? So this actually legitimizes their work, and it also gives an opportunity for their growth and their professionalization. I think that is the best way to do. सर आपने कहा कि आपका अभी आ रहा है एक इको पार्क, सो इसके इस दरमियान एक्चुअली आप लोग देख सकते हैं कि अगर इंडस्ट्रियल एस्टेट में 5% जो एक्चुअली देना चाहिए रिसाइकलिंग के लिए, उसका भी आप लाभ उठा सकते हैं.
नहीं, एक्चुअली मैडम हमारे यहाँ दिल्ली में क्या है कि दिल्ली में रिसाइकलिंग फैसिलिटी नहीं है कोई, और डिसमेंटलिंग भी हमारे यहाँ अलाउड नहीं है. अभी हमने रिसेंटली अलाउ करा है कि डिसमेंटलिंग मैनुअली. तो अभी रिफर्बिशर भी इतने नहीं है लोग एक्चुअली, अपने लॉ की वजह से कि हमें क्या, हम जाएंगे अगर पॉल्यूशन कंट्रोल के बाद हमें कुछ प्रॉब्लम्स आ सकती हैं, तो लोग इनिशिएट ही नहीं करते हैं कि वो आते नहीं. हम लोगों को मोटिवेट करते हैं, आप आओ इंडस्ट्रियल एरिया में आओ, तो हमारे से परमिशंस लो, आप लीगली काम करो. लेकिन वो इतने जो उनका सिस्टम चल रहा है, क्योंकि उनमें जितना भी मैंने देखा है, मैं मिलता हूँ लोगों से, तो हम उनको मोटिवेट करते हैं, लेकिन उनका क्या है कि वो इस जीएसटी है और इसमें सिस्टम में आना नहीं चाहते. वो कहते हैं कि हमें तो ये कैश पेमेंट ही ठीक है, इसी में सारा ना टैक्स देना है ना कुछ करना है. तो वो सारा उसी इकोनॉमी में ही उसी में चल रहे हैं, वो पहले इकोनॉमी है इसकी. तो अभी इसमें तो मतलब आप समझ सकते हो कि एक डिपार्टमेंट के हमारी एक लिमिटेशंस होती हैं कि हम कहाँ तक एक्शन ले सकते हैं, क्या कर सकते हैं. उसमें रूल्स तो बन जाते हैं, लेकिन एक्शन लेना उसके लिए हमारे को थोड़ा सा प्रॉब्लम फेस करनी पड़ती है. कई बार ये चैलेंज है हमारे लिए, पुलिस फोर्स लेना, करना, जाना वहाँ पे, उनको बंद करना, उनको सील करना. तो वो, लेकिन वो कोई परमानेंट सोल्यूशन नहीं आया है उसके लिए, जब तक गवर्नमेंट नहीं कुछ करेगी इनिशिएटिव्स में. उनको कोई अच्छा लोकेशन दे, या उनके जिस एरिया में, जैसे आपने अभी नाम लिया, सीलमपुर है, मुस्तफाबाद है, ये सारे एकदम हब है, इनके हॉटस्पॉट्स हैं हमारे. तो इसमें या तो गवर्नमेंट इधर कोई लैंड है इसका, ऐसा लैंड, पीस ऑफ लैंड रखे और इनको यहाँ से जाए, क्योंकि इनको लगता है अपना रेजिडेंस भी इनका वहीं पे है, वहीं पे ये काम करते हैं. तो ये उनके नियर बाई हो तो शायद ये जल्दी शिफ्ट हो जाए और लीगलाइज मैनर में ये काम करें. तो अभी ये गवर्नमेंट को देखना है कि कैसे इसको करते हैं मैनेज.
So to sum it up, one way that you're suggesting is to figure out a way to legalize their operation and give them a space to operate, so that slowly they are willingly coming into, and by professionalizing themselves and slowly turning into formalizing. So just on that point, my next question goes to you, Ms. Nalini. When we say formalize the informal sector, what are the intangible costs that go unnoticed?
See, formalizing the informal sector is very easily said than done, you know. So the question is, how do you define formalization? Is it the ILO's definition, which many of us who are working in the government sector also cannot meet? So we have to really look at what is formalization, professionalizing. For us at Hasrudala, professionalizing is the first step. And then formalizing. So during the professionalization process itself, there are a lot of formal things come into place. There are some people even have PCB, the local pollution control board, permissions, and they have GST, but they absolutely don't do anything about the labor laws, right? So then do you call them really legalized or formalized? So formalization today in India, 85% of our labor is in informal sector. only 15 are in formal sector. If you are looking at 85% of the people just saying we will formalize them, many of us have tried, right? I mean, it has not been completely formalized, but semi-formal, yes, it has happened. And also looking at centers like in Jolly Mohalla, which is a market for waste in Bangalore. It is in the center of the city and it's a private market, you know. And looking at a space where you can do some collective processing, like for example, okay, you can come here and actually rent 2 hours and you can bail it. You can rent 3 hours and you can actually shred your material. So that kind of common infrastructure, one has to look at it. In Bangalore, we have a market for rice, we have a market for bananas, we have market for flowers. Why can't we have a market specifically for this so that we can actually design it in a way that is appropriate? So just talking about formalization is not going to answer all your questions, because we have 35,000 waste pickers in Bangalore and we don't have 35,000 jobs. Even when we look at different kinds of green jobs which we have listed, it will not even cover about 10% of the city waste pickers. So we should really look at professionalizing. Some of our waste pickers today are filing income tax return, paying ESI and PF for their workers, but the land is subsidized by the government. Right? And we also have other waste pickers who are actually running their own businesses. We have people who have signed up as MSME. It is not like it happened overnight. We have been working with them for 10 years to make this happen. That kind of a planning should be done. Even with the pollution control board, with the previous board, we had talked to them, incentivize them to become formalized instead of penalizing. I'm telling you, we have put up a structure for manufacturing these boards out of multi-layered plastic. It took us 3 months to get that, and we still did not figure out how to do our application online. It was very tough. And when we started, the amount of money we had to pay for the board was 75,000. By the time we finished the whole process, then the prices raised and it was 1,50,000 to get a license. If you are going to be so difficult in your form filling, your compliances and all that, how will a waste picker who has not read or ability to read and write can do? In one of our interviews for our study, one of the person who is doing the pelletization told us, "Madam, I don't read and write. I have a lot of 3 or 4 people who are actually clerks. I don't need 3 or 4 people. But because I don't want, I have a redundancy in that, because I know I can't do it. If one person doesn't come, the other person does it. So I'm in compliance." But he cuts money for the labor. People who actually do the work, right? So making it little more less complicated, accessible. I mean, whatever you do for the next 10, 20 years, there will be informal sector unless we as a society demand for a better, working condition, and the government puts in an investment in this, EPR puts an investment in this, it's not going to happen. If EPR is thinking about only 1 rupee, you will not be able to do this at all. So EPR also has to put in the human cost that is required to make this good. So what we heard in Netherlands, it will take many years for us to go there, but we have an aspiration to go there. How do we take people along? That is the key. And we have written a lot. It's very difficult to say everything in few minutes, but we can always share, and we'll be happy to participate in your study also.
Thank you so much. I think the closing, you made the perfect closing statement here. We as a society must demand for better working conditions. I think there's no better way to sum this panel discussion up. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Nalini. Thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajiv, for joining this panel and making time. So next, I would like to move on to the next session. Yes, Pranshu, you have to add something?
Yeah, there is something that I would like to still discuss with the group. Just one point. Yeah. So one of the things that we have been trying to figure out is how much does it really cost from a price increment perspective? So if we are to really charge, if we are to really pay for the right costs of EPR. So let's say, for a chips packet, which is priced at 15 rupees, what is the price increment that we are talking of?
I would say for us, it is
So we try to do this for multiple product categories. So if I were
price
to
increment, go ahead.
Yeah. So if I look at, let's say multi-layered packaging and then considering an average chips packet sells at 15 rupees, we are talking of a price increase of 0.3%, anywhere between 0.2 to 0.3% on the average selling price. If we were to talk of electronics, let's take example of a laptop. We are talking of an increment of anywhere between 0.1 to 0.3% increment on the price of the laptop. If we were to talk of a fridge, consider that it is very voluminous and a big cost goes into the logistics of a refrigerator. So there we are talking of roughly 1 to 2%. So if we look at for a mobile phone, it is less than 0.05%. So what we are finding is that if we were to compare the cost versus the average selling price, there is not a huge price increment that is to be passed, but again, level playing field is missing. So until unless everyone does it, why should I do it? I mean, and if I were a brand, I would just think like that. I mean, otherwise they will be penalized for increasing the price, whereas their competitor is not. So any points, any views on this thing?
Maybe I can just quickly mention, at least from the Dutch perspective, and I'm quite conscious that in that sense we can speak from a very privileged position, most of us at least. But I also just shared it in the chat because I forgot to respond to your questions, Shapija, on do we have any methodologies on measuring actually what the cost is. But so we have they call themselves a movement, but there is an organization that started in the Netherlands called True Price. And so they indeed also try and make visible if there's a current price for a product, but what if we would price in environmental and social costs? And actually that indeed, so they even opened a supermarket here, so where they then add the extra cost, and they make it visible. And indeed, it's quite similar. That, I mean, certain products do jump in price quite a lot, and that makes you realize that the big supermarket brands, how much power they have, that they can actually sell below cost level, certain prices to attract customers. So actually, indeed, that's not a level playing field at all. But if we then make it explicit, that we then also start to realize in our role as consumers what something costs. And then I just come back again to indeed the awareness. Like sometimes it's not even that much more to pay, but sometimes it is more to pay. And then we can also realize, but actually, hey, who is paying this price? And if there's a big corporate, they can afford to sell something below cost price because they will actually capture with bigger margins on other products. But no, I shared the link, and I saw that in certain cases, indeed, the true price doesn't have to be so much more. So I hope this shed some light from the Dutch perspective.
Yeah, Pranchu, I don't think we have done a percentage calculation, but I don't think it's more than 1 or 2%. It is also a fact, we did our brand audit and we studied 120,000 packages this year. And many of them are also from MSME, which are not really big brands. So that becomes really a problem to set that kind of 1% and 2%. Maybe your study can help us do that. And also there is so much exemption for milk sachets, milk sachets could be, and that's the biggest polluter in our system. We have seen continuously for 2 brand audits that has come out as the biggest one, and it's cooperative movement. So you have to have a different kind of strategy for a cooperative movement and a brand. We have to all come together to think through. I don't think any one of us have answers for that.
No, this is a very tough one, and I think everyone is struggling, including the brands themselves, at how do you do it? Because the level playing field makes a hell lot of difference in such cases. So, but yeah, I think as we mature, as we learn more, I think these systems will evolve. Today is just a start of a debate in this space. So we could then move on to the next session. Thank you, Nalini. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Sri Rakesh ji. for being a part of this panel. In the next session, we have Thomas Lindquist. Thomas is largely known as the father of EPR. He coined the term in 1990 and has been actually involved in setting up systems in multiple countries, in the best of the studies in helping optimize EPR-based systems. So with Thomas, I happen to be a student of Thomas, and I take a hell lot of pride in that. So Thomas, thank you for being here. And what we would do is I'd ask a few questions, and basis the dialogue that has happened till now, you can also give us your views. And because this is not just the case of India. I mean, in most emerging markets, the costs will play a significant role. And unless we find a way to define or keep a reference check on these costs, you have been talking a lot about the race to the bottom. I mean, that is what happens, and the system kills itself at some point in time. So Thomas, any overview, any points from you to start with before I go into very specific questions?
Well, the first is that I really want to thank you for the discussion today. I think it's been really good discussion. And for us who are not equally familiar with the situation in India, I think we have learned a lot. Maybe what I would like to very quickly emphasize is the last discussion about what does it actually cost. And our experience from Europe is that it is not big costs. There could be one or two exemptions where the cost for various reasons have been higher, but overall, it is not a big cost for producers. And what we are trying to save is very small money. That's kind of my first statement. I find it really embarrassing that we have corporates who are kind of shifting to something they probably know is of bad quality just to save very, very small costs which they would easily use for marketing or something without blinking. And now suddenly that is enough to go from something reasonable to something totally unreasonable. So I'm sorry for those companies.
So Thomas, have you seen, I mean, this challenge would have also arrived in Europe, and Europe has now spent at least 2 decades of EPR implementation in one form or the, whether it was voluntary or mandated. So at least 2 decades of work has happened. So have you seen changes? How have these price corrections happened? Because if it is not corrected, ultimately it would lead to a market crash. Because if I look, and if I take example of plastics, like Nalini mentioned, the real cost of doing a multi-layered packaging, collection, recycling is anywhere between 10 rupees to 15 rupees per kilogram. Whereas what brands are willing to pay is, around a rupee, 2 rupees at max. Barring a few exceptions. So I'm not saying that each and every brand is in the same space. There are organizations who are doing some fantastic work. But if I were to look at where is the major market playing, similarly on the e-waste side, we have some very good brands who are doing some exceptional work, trying to do the things in the right way. But we have also, if I look at the major market, it is leaning towards something, like 10 to 15, 20 rupees a kilogram for electronic waste, which is hardly any money to make systems work. So how did this correction happen in Europe or in certain countries? And any suggestions from those?
Well, you can say that there is quite a substantial control of the organizations which are representing industry. So the producer responsibility organizations. Most of the time we have been good at selecting and allowing the ones who do good work. So once you join these, the problems you are referring would not be so big. So what could you do as an individual producer who doesn't want to follow rules and save on the pennies? Well, you would probably try to pretend that you don't put anything on the market. You would try to escape that. So I think that is the bigger problem in Europe. Now, it's not only the ones who don't want to do and don't want to pay, it's also the ones who don't know about the rules.
Yeah.
And I think that has been a big problem to reach all the companies are coming in and make them understand that you are actually obliged to do this. And there I think we need to work quite a lot more in Europe. So then, very similar to this is the question about the consumers. I mean, citizens, do they understand that it's important to take care of these products in a good way? Because we are creating problems for ourselves and for the future when we don't do it. And we are kind of helped by the fact that you can't sell many products in Europe as second-hand even, but especially not when they are worn out. There's very little of a market for that. But for the few products where people either perceive there is a market or there really is a market, we do see problems. And we do have to work with that also. We spoke about mobile phones. And it's been really difficult to collect mobile phones in Europe. And what is happening then? Well, Summit finds a market, a second-hand market, often outside of the borders of at least the parts of Europe where I live in. But going on the global market, being used maybe, or being scavenged and etc. And then people have a bit of impression that you could get money from this. It also means that even the ones who don't care about that amount of money and so on, we are sitting on it. So there is a lot of old mobile phones in the cupboard. And the risk is, of course, once you deal with that in your home, you may not have the time or whatever inclination to hand it in the right place, and it ends up in the mixed waste or something similar. So we do have challenges. I understand it as you have really big challenges in India. So let's say we are at least some steps ahead when it comes to these areas, but we all have to work on it. Now, how do you work on this? Well, one is to get people to understand, to make it clear from the age of children to the age of retirement that this is something which you should do, and it will cost our country and maybe ourselves more than we are trying to save. The other is that we must make sure that our authorities understand that this system has to be governed from the authorities, has to be supervised in a fair and clear way. It's essential. It's too easy in many cases to come around with unfair competition in the sense that you're actually not doing the work, but you are making up some figures. And what should the others do to compete with you? Well, where we get this race to the bottom. And the few examples I've seen in Europe have been very difficult to deal with. But behind it all comes rules which are really enforced in a transparent way. So I'm sure that there's a lot to do when it comes to knowledge raising inside the various pollution control boards, among inspectors, and an emphasis that this is important and that you have to be aware of how to supervise this, how to inspect what is happening. So the people who do it really know what they are doing.
Yeah. So actually, Thomas, this has been a loose point, and we discussed in one of our previous webinars that capacity both for enforcement as well as capacity in terms of understanding the subject matter is building up. We are in very early stages, and pollution control boards are in most cases stressed in terms of implementation. The competence in this space is starting to be built up, so not everyone understands the subject matter because product-related policies are very new at the country level. We have only focused on manufacturing as a big way to control the pollution. So, do you think another point which I'd like to link is each and every government across the world now, and the Ukraine-Russia crisis has made it even more prominent, is looking at resilience in the economy, the ability to manufacture the products on their own, or at least some critical components within the country, and not being reliant on a third organization. And if we are to look at material for creation, that is not really available in each and every country. So waste will play a significant role in terms of ability to create new products, because this becomes then a resource. So are you seeing any global developments in this direction where the resilience in the economy, or like in India, we have a whole program called Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is all about creating within India, within the country, and making country very resilient to any external forces. So do you think that sort of a system will allow these costs to at some point in time become apparent, better enforcement? Again, very early stages is what I see in India, but at least that dialogue is starting to take. Like, where do we get the materials if we are to manufacture?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you could have been describing the situation in Europe in many ways here. I mean, Europe has lost so much of manufacturing during the last decades, and there is a big interest to get some of this back. And economies of production and so on makes it not unlikely that this could happen. More automation in the processes and so on opens up a possibility. But when we come back, where do we have the materials, the raw materials we need? And I see a rising interest in this. And doesn't mean only that we have to collect things, but we have to recycle in a way that we get the quality back, so that they can actually be used for similar purposes. I'm speaking about, for instance, metals. We can't degrade the metals if we really want to have them as a good raw material. So we have to be better when it comes to this. And I think it's a very interesting area. And when I'm trying to emphasize something in the European context today, this is exactly what I'm trying to say. There are also many reasons for this, and having raw materials nearby is a big benefit. I hope we will remember this in the coming years. We sometimes have a tendency to forget things very quickly and go back to a situation which wasn't that great. So let's try to avoid that when it comes to this now and really continue to work on it and implement it.
Sure. And Thomas, are there any examples, not just in Europe, but I mean, you do so much research in this space. Are you seeing any examples where uh, prices of products have been increased, even marginally? Because, at least what the research, the first line level of, draft work that we have done internally shows that at least for most of the products, the increment is not very large. We are talking of less than a percentage point of increment. Have you seen any effort in any specific country where prices have been increased? Because the offering to a consumer is very powerful. Like even if we are, let's say, if someone were to offer me a 0.5% increase in the product, but in return, guarantee of a collection system, guarantee of the product being recycled, all information to me available, I think it's a good probability that a lot of people would today be happy to pay some additional money, and it is some, it is not very high. I really like to emphasize that. So have you seen any countries where this has happened in a significant level, or even if voluntarily, where we are seeing that okay, it really worked, price increment did not change, did not shrink the market? Because a big argument from the brand side, and I used to myself work at Nokia, was that if there is a price increment, then it would lead to market shrinkage. But do we have any examples where some price increment has been done, but it has not led to any market shrinkage, and actually people are happy to pay?
And you sometimes hear about similar things. I haven't seen real studies on it, and I have few examples that could be used for making deductions. On the other hand, I mean, we have a lot of companies who have done things, and obviously we find it worthwhile, even in a country where you pay equally to the PROs, whether your product is much easier to deal with or not. Still, a number of companies have done this. And whether the argument is strongest in the sense that I can get recognition from buyers, and we speak not only about individuals, we speak about companies and so on who can have a more open view on this. Or they are expecting that someday in the future I will get the benefits from it. I'm not sure, but I can't help thinking that we are speaking about so marginal cost that it can't steer the way a company, or let's say a company who wants to be responsible, is acting. So I have very difficulty to understand the brands who are taking risks, ending up as part of something which is not working at all, is some kind of scam for that level of money. It's so marginal compared to the image costs. Really.
Yeah. And here lies the whole conundrum. Like, while it is so low, but still, things are not moving. I hear again level playing field as one of the biggest reasons why it is not moving. Because if we were to do it, what if others are not doing? How do we compare? But yeah. So what I'll do is now I'll open for questions. So if anyone of you in the audience, if you have any questions, please put it on the chat. I'll pick it up and ask. There are most of the panelists are still here, so we will take the question. So one of the questions, Wilma, and I may like to take it to you if you are there. I think you are there. So one of the persons has asked that should we not look at a corporate waste responsibility sort of a rule instead of, like CSR, where it's mandated to have a budget for this program. So CSR, for example, mandates 2% of your annual profits to be used for doing philanthropic work. So should we not look at corporate waste responsibility where it is mandated to have certain costs defined?
Yeah, see, so Prancho, my camera is not working, but I can just say this, that basically now under ESG, already there is, all of these things are there. So there is enough and more in terms of compliances, regulations, expectations, all of that. So, one more kind of these kind of requirements, I feel, may not be necessary. We just have to get companies to follow the regulations. ESG now is kind of being taken seriously under the BRSR reporting structures that are there, top 1,000 companies. So at least let us get 1,000 companies, to be responsible, and those 1,000 companies will, then the next 1,000 companies will follow. So I am thinking that we have to make this work with whatever we have currently.
Sure. Thank you. If any of the speakers wants to, panelists, if any of you wants to pitch in, give your final remarks or anything that you wish to share, which you haven't been able to, please do, because we are almost at the end of the webinar. So if there is anything that you wish to share, please come and share. Okay, so there is another question which has come. Why is there so much lack of awareness in public despite so many efforts by various organizations? What are the challenges? So anyone, Nalini, would you like to take this question? So why is there so much lack of awareness despite so many efforts by various organizations? I can share till Nalini, puts on her mic. I can share my viewpoint here. And Tamara, if you wish to add, please do. So one of the challenges that I see, first of all, are there really so many efforts by various organizations? I mean, compare the amount of messaging on a product sales, branding, any other activity versus recycling. So we are still talking of very small work going. And again, my statements always mean that there will be some outliers. There will be some very good brands who are doing some very good work. But my statement is on a general level. So are we really seeing that amount of funding which should go in creation of awareness? The answer is honestly no. While we have seen some efforts, but the holistic effort by the industry as a whole, where every, at least 50% of the industry members are putting in efforts to drive awareness. I think that is still missing. There are few companies who are doing some exceptional work, but that is it. So Tamara, do you want to add any point here?
Yeah, so a few things that popped into my mind is that I mean, it's also just reflections. I don't have the real answer in
Sure.
as much as it's there. But why is there a lack of awareness? That I was thinking, well, on the one hand, I think there's so much communication that we get thrown at us day to day. And maybe also more about even what was at the heart of this specific webinar, like the marketing budgets are there. So we are aware of all the benefits of buying something new and the newest technology. But indeed, the budgets aren't there for the end of life, end of use. And I guess thereby also not the awareness, because basically the companies who should communicate about it, who should take the responsibility, feel the responsibility about increasing awareness, are still doing that, I believe, in a limited way. And another thought that popped into my mind is also a lack of awareness because it's not in our sight. That currently waste is something that is seen as let's take it away and move it out of our day-to-day life and then move it to a landfill. So we don't actually, I think the lack of awareness is also because we don't realize in our role as consumers so much, if you're not active in this field, actually how big the problem is. Not even I, in my role as a consumer. My waste is being collected in the morning and it's taken out of my sight, out of mind. And so that was one of the reflections I had, that I sometimes think maybe we should use more imagery, the power of visualization, to say, hey, this is why it's important to address waste, not only because we should flip it from cost to value, like there's value in it, but also by making it more visual. It's like, it's not if something is taken away from a city center, that it's also food, that it just has disappeared.
Sure. Apart from that, then there is one more question on deposit refund scheme, that should we look at a much better implementation of a deposit refund scheme, and is it possible? So again, at least from my side, and if anyone wants to add on DRS implementation in India, Nalini, if you want to come, Vilma, please feel free to come. What my reading has been, while DRS has been suggested in the rules, it is not implemented just because of this specific concept that any deposit fund scheme leads to market shrinkage. So if I increase the price, if I ask for a small money, which will be refunded back to the consumer, it leads to market shrinkage. So there have been very strong arguments that we should not be increasing the cost of products, even if the money is refundable, because that may lead to a challenge for communities, for people who don't have enough purchasing power. So product may become unviable. But at the same time, what we are also realizing is that the cost of going circular is not so high. So does that statement really stand? Again, not enough research is available at this end, but that's from my side. Anyone else who wants to share their view on this point?
I agree, Pranshu. I don't think the cost is too much, but research has to be done in that area. We have done it a long time back and we have to redo it. And I think doing it as a single person or a single organization versus a group of all of us who think alike is much better. And also, I think we should take some of the departments which are making all these decisions along, because you can't make these, any policy that is people oriented, done by people, participation is always successful in implementation. And in this particular thing, it has not happened, so we need to do it. And the cost of circularity has to be assessed, and a white paper about it should come out. All of us have been speaking about it. I don't think collectively we have done anything, so that's the first step, collectively to doing it. And also some of the the cost don't go to the consumers, it can also go reduce little bit of profit of the corporates also. And biggest thing we have to really look at is MSME also.
Yeah.
I completely agree with Nalini. I think profitability is something now that circular economy is going to also be addressing that issue. So, and if DRS is the best, is a good solution along with the other solutions, then we should be pushing for DRS, and that will be another way in which livelihood can be created, and the problems are another solution. So we can't always be looking at the fact that will this reduce, actually we want to reduce consumption as well. So this could be another way in which we do it. Yeah. So agree on those points. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Vilma. Thank you, Nalini. So with this, I think we'll like to wrap up the session. We have already exceeded the time by 10 minutes. I would really like to thank, first of all, our sponsors, Apple, Dell Technologies, and Hewlett Packard Enterprises for enabling this series of webinars, which is talking about demystifying EPR, a key enabler for circular economy. I would also like to thank Vilma, Shri Rajiv, Nalini, Tamara, Shri Priya, my colleague, and Thomas for being a part of this dialogue, and for all of you for participating and asking questions. I think it is high time that we put in we start at least some level of work in figuring out what are these costs, because until unless there is a reference document, if until unless there is some level of research which is published, basis experiences. One of the good things is now we have over 5+ years of experience in the country on electronic waste, over a few years of experience in plastics waste, and as we go and implement EPR across multiple sectors. We started from one, but we are now covering almost 5 sectors, and this will only grow going forward. This reference document could become very helpful, and it can keep on evolving as we understand more. So with that, a lot of thanks to all of you for participating today. We will be back with our next series. The next webinar would be on somewhere around the International E-Waste Day, which is on 14th October. And we will reach out to you once we have planned that. But thank you for your participation today.
We can share the topic name also, Pranchu. Recycle it all, no matter how small. So that is the theme for International E-Waste Day. So it would be in the mid of October. We will keep you posted on the date as well. And yeah, Pranchu, please, you may go ahead.
Thank you to all of you. And we will be initiating this study. We will reach out to many of you over the course of these webinar series. I mean, we have had some very, very interesting dialogues which have happened. Something that we actually are ourselves also surprised by the depth of the dialogue, by the quality of discussions that have happened. So really thanks to all of you. And we look forward to interacting with you as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. In case anyone wants to reach out to us for the study, please feel free to write back to us at engage@Karo Sambhav. So we will get back to you on that. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Bye.
Have a great day. Bye.